Eighth grade, welcome to geography class today. Today we're going to take a look at the critical thinking skill activity for what is chapter 5 as we continue our study of the United States west of the Mississippi River. The skill that we're particularly learning and working on is the skill of cause and effect. Now let's jump into our learning and identify what this skill is and how we can actually apply it in our lives. Learning the skill. It's important to be able to determine cause and effect when reading an informational text. Anytime you're reading something, you're taking in information, you might see that there's a piece of information that's presented and then there's the result of whatever is being talked about. It's really important not only in geography but in all aspects of when you're reading and taking in information to be able to understand cause and effect. A cause is a thing or a condition that makes something else happen, and an effect is the change or the result of that cause. A single cause may have more than one effect. Similarly, a single effect may be the result of more than one cause. In a nonfiction text, the effects are often stated before the causes, like they're shown in this linear fashion, as in this came first, then this came next. Which is confusing since they happened afterward. Look for the clue words such as because, so, as a result, consequently, led to, and so on. So sometimes they talk about the result of something and then they go back and say, well, this is because of what happened before. You've got to be able to recognize what that cause was and then what the result is afterwards in that linear form of what happened first, then what happened next, and then identify where it is being presented backwards in the text. Let's go ahead and practice that right here. It asks us to read the paragraph below and then answer the following questions. The Santa Clara Valley is a picturesque region in Northern California situated between Santa Cruz Mountains on the west, the Diablo Mountains on the east, and the San Francisco Bay to the north. It was once nicknamed the Valley of Heart's Delight because of the beautiful and agricultural productivity. Until the middle of the 20th century, it was blanketed with fruit, nut, and orchards and farms. But as early as the 1800s, changes started taking place that would eventually result in this becoming known today as Silicon Valley. The first step in the Santa Clara Valley evolution into Silicon Valley came in the 1890s when Stanford University was founded in Palo Alto, California. The great minds that were attracted to the university created a center for technological education and innovation that continues to function today. Radio broadcasting was pioneered in the area in the early years of the 20th century. Naval air stations were built in the 1930s and grew tremendously during World War II. After the war, this military presence led to the development of high-tech aerospace industries in the valley. Not long after the war ended, Stanford University ran into financial difficulties. To raise money, it leased part of its facilities to high-tech companies. Historians cite this arrangement as a major reason for the rise of the computer industry in this area. The valley was rich with high-tech talent. Bill Hewlett and Dave Packard, founders of the electronics giant Hewlett and Packard, were classmates at Stanford in the early 1930s. The inventors of the transistor, William Shockley, was a native of Palo Alto. By 1971, so many high-tech companies operated there. Don C. Hoffler, a science journalist, nicknamed the area Silicon Valley. He named it after the chemical element silicon, which is primary component of computer chips. Later in the decade, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak teamed up to create the world's first personal computer. You might know it as Apple. By the early 2000s, about 4,000 information technology companies operated in Silicon Valley or Silicon Valley. Now, it asks us to circle the cause and effect words and phrases in this passage. Now let's go back paragraph by paragraph and look for some of those specific cause and effect words. Remember back in the beginning where we talked about learning, you're looking for words such as because, so, as a result, consequently, led to, and so on. In the first paragraph, take a look. It uses the words because of and result. Here's where it says because of. It's talking about the way in which this was a perfect place for growing things, but as a result, it started to take on this nickname and later becoming what was Silicon Valley. Resulted in, or as a result, is right here. In the next paragraph, it takes a look at the first step. Anytime it's sequencing something, that's a way in which you can say what happened first and then what happened next. That's the exact representation of cause and effect. Then we also have the word created. Created is going to be the point in where something was, and then there's a creation, and there's something afterwards that follows in this regard. Lastly, it talks about something being built or pioneered, so that's something that's new or changing. That would be the point where you'd identify, well, something was before and now after is that effect, cause and effect. In our third paragraph, after the war, so here's an afterwards, it's giving that, here's the result. After the war again. And then in this last sentence it says, as a major reason for the rise, it gives the reason, as in here's something that happened, this is the reason why it happened. So that's the cause and effect relationship again. In this last paragraph, paragraph 4, it says the valley was rich in high-tech talent. It's talking about the way in which this development has occurred. Here in this portion, it talks about the way in which the companies, the number of companies have developed. So it's giving you the statistics to say, here is the result of all of the different people that have come to this region to grow the technological advancements or to grow the different types and ways in which the industry has moved forward. Number 2 asks us, what was the effect of the military presence in Santa Clara Valley after World War II? Well, the military used this region and used the technology that's going to be growing in this region for its aerospace industry. As technology develops, the weaponry usually develops, and in the military you want to have the best weapons to give you the best chance to win in any regard. So the best weaponry, that technology in this form, was the way in which they developed aerospace and the aerospace industry. We read about this in the daily life portion of how that industry drives things forward. After and during the war, it talked about this aerospace industry growing quite intensely, and it was a way in which actually for Stanford to raise money by renting some of this space or leasing this space to these technological companies that are coming as this result. Number 3, name 2 causes that led to the rise of Silicon Valley. The first cause that was presented was the influence from an agricultural-based area to this area of innovation and education. And the prominent university that was listed here was Stanford University. So because Stanford is here, it's now attracting people in the form of education and innovation to this region. The next reason why this place was known as Silicon Valley, or the rise of Silicon Valley, is because of that place of education leads to innovation. Now there's this huge presence of talented innovators and engineers that are coming to this region because that's where the education of that is happening. So wherever you see education happening, you see the kind of attraction to those types of industries, because a business that needs some type of educated worker or a skilled worker might just pluck right from that university. Anytime that you see a kind of a medical school or a research hospital, I bet you there's a hospital right next to it. For example, my children were both born at Froedtert right here in Milwaukee. Right attached to Froedtert is the Medical College of Wisconsin. Where do you think Froedtert hires a lot of doctors from? Where do you think Froedtert gets a lot of its workers from? They actually have student workers from the medical college work right there. So anytime you have education, you a lot of times have innovation, or you have the specific skilled workers to work in that area, and that's what happened here in Silicon Valley. Now let's apply the skill. Here the directions ask us to reread the passage and complete the items below. I'm not going to reread it for you. I'm going to have you reread it on your own, and then I'll help you walk through what it's looking for specifically in each of these questions. Number 1 says, rewrite the sentence, the valley was rich with high-tech talent, to make it into a statement that clearly expresses a cause and effect relationship. Now here you're going to look to use one of the words that was presented in our practice portion and in this part of your instruction, the learning. You should probably rewrite that to include because, so, as a result, consequently, led to, and so on. For example, it might sound like this. Because the valley was rich with high-tech talent, tech industries chose to be there. Oops, gave you an answer. Number 2, combine the following 2 sentences into a single cause and effect sentence. After the war, Stanford University ran into financial difficulties. To raise money, it leased parts of its facilities to high-tech companies. What word can you put in between those 2 sentences to join them together to say, here was the difficulty of the financial situation, and then here's the result of them raising money? What can you do to link those 2 items together? Is there a way in which you can plug in one of these words? So, as a result, consequently, led to, or so on. Use one of those to plug in appropriately, where you can identify in that sentence the cause and effect portions with that linking or conjoining portion. You have both of those pieces of information in there. Again, using one of those words to fill that in. You should be done with your homework as soon as that gets filled out completely. Thanks for following along.